Welcome to the Week in Italian Startup, where we discuss the latest highlights happening in the Italian tech and investment ecosystem. All right, welcome everyone to the Week in Italian Startup, where me and Nicola, we dive into the latest news of the Italian startup ecosystem. Welcome, Nick.
Ciao, Jack. Thank you. Great being back here. Ciao, everybody.
Absolutely. All right, so Nick, are we reaching the 2 billion euro invested into the startup ecosystem here in Italy? We've seen a few different point of views. The Osservatorio from Politecnico di Milano announced that we actually surpassed the 2 billion in investments. I know that you have a different opinion because you diligently build your own tracker in terms of equity investments, and we're not quite there yet. So I was thinking, what is your take?
Yeah, well, as you said, the amount of capital raised by Italian startups really depends on what you define as capital, and as Italian 2, and as a startups 3. So what you put into the the borders of your analysis. So basically, I think I'm a bit stricter in my weekly analysis because I only put equity investments by startups based out of Italy. I try not to put debt, and I'm not accounting for crowdfunding. So that's a considerable chunk of investments that I'm not putting into my chart. I said the difference of the startup observatory of the School of Management, they have a different opinion, more optimistic and very welcome, of course, where we are well above 2 billion. Actually, they say 2.1.
Yes.
They also show an interesting chart about the breakdown of the type of investments. So, international investors coming in, informal investors, formal investors. So that's another interesting take that I don't show at all. And that's probably not in terms of absolute numbers, but in terms of, meaning of what we are seeing. That's an interesting data point.
What I was thinking is actually that there are things that are clear and obvious and insightful, and there are things that I think need to be examined. So what is clear is that the rate has increased. We are kind of hitting the exponential function, I would say, with plus 55% from last year. So basically, just to recap a few numbers, 694 in 2019, 669 in 2020, 1392 in 21, and then 2.1 according to Osservatorio in 2022 with a plus 55% year over year. So what is clear is that there is growth, and this is a very, very positive signal.
Yeah, we all agree on this.
And that's totally. The other element that I thought was great is the big intervention of the international investor that you were mentioning. So if in the previous years we've seen a growth, but it's very small, starting 2021, then is where they hit big. And then when we really see international players coming into the ecosystem. So actually we have, to go in detail, a little bit of a decrease in informal investors year over year, 2021, 2022. Angel, I would say private, maybe company holdings. We have a constant increase in the formal investor, which to my knowledge are institution and venture capital firms. So that's definitely positive, but the big chunk is from the international. So I thought it was very, very interesting.
Yep, I agree with you. So I think that apart from the absolute numbers, everybody has their own. The trend is clear, so we are growing. I don't know whether we are hitting the exponential phase. We are very early in the curve. And again, remember, we are lagging a little bit the rest of at least Europe, but not only Europe. So we'll see the next couple of years what happens. And on these notes, last week, the Atomico published the State of European Tech. And what that report shows is a bit of a slowdown in terms of absolute numbers in investments in Europe. So very good news for now. We'll see how it evolves, as usual.
Totally. And what I would say is also that there are elements here that need to be examined in detail, as you say. Are they counting equity, venture debt, loans, etc., which is big for sure. And I would say also like a few other points, which is, number one, the role of CDP venture capital, which actually probably account, as we always say, like to a big chunk of money. So is it biasing the numbers on a positive side? But we need to be honest and transparent. So is it good? For sure. Yeah, it's good, but it's not technically like VC as VC, I would say, is public money. So that's another point. Another point that I would say is that I believe that 3 of the top funding from 2022 almost account for almost $1 billion. And that's particularly interesting because to my knowledge, and then let me know what you think, Satispay, Casavo, and Bending Spoon, that's really hitting hard on the volume of this number. So the number is a bit skewed in that sense. What's your take on that?
Yeah, absolutely agree. Actually, my big 3 are Scalapay, Satispay, and Casavo, because I try to only look at the equity side. Bending Spoon is a huge round, but only 40 million in equity. It was more than 300 million in debt. So we need to, again, pay attention on what numbers we are talking about here. But I agree with you that top 3, either on my chart or on your chart, are almost 1 billion. So 440 Scalapay, 320 Satispay, 100 Casavo, we are there.
Awesome.
And I'm not surprised, right? So VC is a power law business, and the power law applies everywhere. Also in the distribution of the size of the rounds into a specific ecosystem. So we are starting to see sizable rounds repeatedly. So
exactly. On the last note, and then we move to the deals of the past 2 weeks, is that always I like to compare it with the big guys. So I think US this year in 2022, in terms of equity VC money, is raising around like 250 billion total, which is a little bit lower than last year, but still compared to Italy, of course, is a fraction. Italy is still a fraction of the most evolved ecosystem, the most evolved ecosystem in the world, just to give some perspective. And with that said, we need to be, with our feet on the ground and the head on the cloud. That's what we need to do. So with that said, let's do a run through of the latest deal of the week. So Jobtech is a very interesting play because essentially it's a recruiting tech startup, raised 6 million in a round led by Oltre Impact and Lumen Ventures. So what I found interesting was that impact investing in Italy is acquiring more and more weight. And definitely is sort of the impact thesis is influencing a lot of rounds, and we've seen this happening in many rounds. Oltre has been really active. They raised, I believe, their 3rd fund, and there are more and more investors committed to actually invest in impact causes. So Jobtech is one of them, for example. What I wanted also to point out is a couple of I wanted to move in terms of analogy, because we have like 2 particular raise that are part of a bigger aggregator of startups. So I'm talking about 2 weeks ago, Academia.tv, cooking video course platform, raising 1.3 million euro from a syndicate of business angel. So essentially, they're providing high-quality educational classes for cooking. And what is interesting is that Academia.tv is a part of a bigger group, which is One Day Group, which includes a number of different brands relating to lifestyle, video, etc., and including Scuolazzo, We Road, and Chef in Camicia, among the others. So we've seen aggregators of these kind of digital tech, actually very verticalized on specific sector, and this is one great example. So Academia.tv is providing really high quality cooking classes, and basically they're covering a lot of spectrum Chef in Camicia, on the other hand, is a more popular platform, mostly based on social media. So it's interesting to see how they're congregating this business to actually like build something all together. That's I thought it was particularly cool. BlueBrake is part of Innovia Group, and essentially BlueBrake also managed to raise money, this time though from a different platform, which is the I believe the European Investing Fund. And I thought it was particularly interesting. And the raise is quite substantial, is about 10 million euro, and everything is oriented toward growth and expansion. So very interesting analogy here.
Totally agree. And actually, Innovia is not new to many of these type of operations. So either by investing first and supporting them, or building internally and then supporting the raising capital externally. So absolutely agree with you. And Blubrake is probably not the first round that raises, probably the second or third. So interesting story here.
Yeah. And this is another example of how actually venture debt can be a big part of venture capital in Italy and abroad. This is a great example, especially for, I believe, a hardware company. There is a big case to be made that hardware companies essentially are more prone to get like a loan of that kind of sort. So that's very interesting.
That makes sense.
Totally. All right, moving on to a little bit of corporate venture capital. Just a quick note, Terna, a big utility company active in Italy, also activated a 50 million euro corporate venture capital department. Basically, definitely on the line of the patterns that we have seen in the past year of big corporation, especially in the utility space, launching or interacting very powerfully with startups. So I think this is the nth example of that specific trend, and I thought it was definitely worth mentioning. All right, going on to last week raise. Actually, it was a little bit of a small week, I would say, but definitely the startup that managed to raise is very interesting. So Up2You, green tech startup, raising 3.5 million euro from CDPVC and Azivund Digitech. So maybe let's talk for a second about Up2You.
Yeah, well, as you said before, it fits in this trend that's very notable about ESG related or some, impact related type of investments, and this is both. It's both impact and ESG. And again, it is inside this huge market of analyzing the operations of a business and telling the business, hey, you are not too much, very little sustainable, and then supporting into a path to reaching a better sustainability. In this case, I believe we focus on the E in ESG. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Mm-hmm. That's correct. No, that's absolutely correct.
Yeah. The interesting thing that I noticed on the website, and that's something that you notice on many of the other companies doing something similar, is that basically there are a couple of logos that appear every single time. Verra is one, for example.
Interesting. Yeah. Interesting insight.
So here the point is that, I'm not an expert of this market, but how are things kind of structuring themselves? So you have, on the side, you have businesses, and the businesses have a problem. They want to tell the world that they are sustainable. They're, they offset their emissions, that are environmentally friendly, or getting there. And how do you do that? I don't know, but there are many ways. One of these ways is to say, hey, I sustain, give money, adopt, operate with projects that somewhere else in the world actually have a positive impact in terms of carbon sequestering, carbon emissions, or whatever. And the key problem here is, how do you get access to the projects, to the right projects, and how do you prove that the right projects that you are sustaining are actually carbon sequestering or whatever they're doing with carbon emissions? And then there you have the Verras and the other companies that go out, certify the projects, create a marketplace, a platform, an offering for all the Up2Us in the world to connect and participate. So it's an interesting, two-sided marketplace with two operators working together on the two sides. Verra on one side and Up2You on the other.
Interesting.
So
interesting.
That's interesting. I mean, I'm not an expert in this vertical, but I've been observing this trend.
Yeah.
It's a two-sided marketplace where the two sides are connected by two different players.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And what I would add to that is that also often this is the perfect use case for blockchain technology. So even if there is some winter in the blockchain space to some extent, still this is a great use case that is essentially very valuable. So, and people are using it, Up2You is using it, and other companies are using it. So definitely, thinking about, crypto might fluctuate, but blockchain is here to stay. Maybe that's one angle where blockchain is going to stay and hold position. That's interesting. All right, finishing up with the two last news. What I wanted to mention is MoneyFarm. MoneyFarm going into a strategy of growth by acquisition. MoneyFarm acquired Profile Pensions. And what was particularly interesting is that the acquisition actually gave MoneyFarm an access to assets that overall in aggregate then would make the group hit about 3 billion British pound in asset under management. Let's call it like that. Yeah. So I think that was a great move and definitely a very interesting way to grow.
Yeah, if I'm not wrong, a little less than 1 year ago, MoneyFarm announced they got to 2 billion under management. So again, power low. So the trend is starting to grow quickly because they took quite some time to get to the first billion. Then the second billion was kind of fast in comparison. Then third billion, more than one actually, 1.3.
Yeah.
It took less than a year. So
awesome. It's calculated about.
Well, let's see.
Yeah. Well, for sure, 115,000 new possible customers on the platform. So maybe that's the ramp. That's part of
Not too shabby. Not
at all. Last but not least, Fondo Italiano di Investimento (SGR) basically raising 130 million euro for the first closing of Fondo Italiano Agri-Food. So good news, I would say, for the agri-tech space. What I wanted to say is that maybe on the later stage, so the Fondo is investing big check size between 10 to 15 million per check, which tells us that essentially it's for small to bigger companies, not really for early stage startups in the space. But great news for the ecosystem, definitely more liquidity to actually grow, even scale-ups in the food space. And Italy is renowned to have great talent in the space and great ideas for sure. The industry is thriving and definitely a positive sign for that.
Yeah, I agree with you. This is more of a private equity or growth equity fund than a venture capital fund, but still very good news to have a professional investor vertical on this market. So there's a strong pipeline here going forward. So not too shabby.
Awesome.
Nice.
Nick, thank you so much, and see you next week then.
Ciao, Jack. Thank you very much. Have a great day. See you soon.